So once again, I probably need to start by apologising for my absence on YouTube recently. These videos are usually an after dinner job, but as mentioned in other videos, currently in this really hot weather, my house gets really hot by the afternoon. Living in Bendigo, you don't get a cool afternoon sea breeze, it just gets hotter and hotter. So opening windows and doors doesn't make any difference. And my air conditioner is really loud. Apparently, or it seems that in the Bendigo area, they've not heard of split air conditioning, or at least not in the older houses. It's just these big clunkers that are attached to the window, and you just about have to have earplugs in if you're going to be in the same room as the damn things. If you're not in the same room as them, you cook. So anyway, let's move on. Now, my previous video was by this same creator, and he was saying 10 things he hated about Australia. So I thought, well, it's only fair, let's even it up a bit and have a look at the 10 things that he loves about living in Australia. Now, I'm doing this completely raw. I haven't looked at any of this video whatsoever, so I've got no idea what to expect with this. So we're going to discover this together. So let's just jump in and see what he has to say.
My name is Dane. I post videos all about moving to Australia. In today's two videos, yes, I'm posting two videos today. They're going to be short and sweet, but I thought you guys love hearing about my experiences of living in Australia. So in this video, I'm going to be giving you 10 things that I love about living in Australia. And then you're going to want to watch another video straight after, which I'll link down below. It's 10 things I hate. Not necessarily hate, that's a very strong word, but 10 things I don't like about living here. So I thought this is a good way to share my perspective of living in Australia as someone from England. For context of this video, I'm a 29-year-old from England. I moved to Australia 2 years ago on a working holiday visa. In these videos, I'm not dogging Australia at all. I absolutely love it here. I just think there's things that I don't love about Australia, and that's okay. We don't have to love every aspect of a country, but I just thought, actually, these are really interesting things that you guys might want to be aware of if you're going to move here.
So the video that he just mentioned is the one that I previously did a reaction to. So I will leave the link for that one in the description section below so that you can go and check it out if you want to. Now, it's my understanding that he has since left Australia and is living somewhere else again. So it seems that his dream of getting a working visa, a lasting working visa, didn't quite pan out for him, and he ended up having to move on.
These things are by no means in any order. They are just 10 random things. I sat down with a pen and paper and I thought, right, these are 10 things that I love about Australia. These are 10 things that I don't necessarily love about Australia. The first thing that I love about living in Australia is how beautiful the country is. Now, I live on the East Coast. I live like a 10-minute walk, even less than that, down the road from the beach. And I just go to the beach every day and I'm just like, wow, I can't believe I live in a country as beautiful as Australia. I'm from a little small country town in England and it just doesn't compare. So I think I'm really grateful, like on a daily basis, that I see the blue skies and I live in a country as beautiful as this.
Well, I don't think you can really argue with that. No matter where you go in Australia, there are just some utterly beautiful places. And it's not just about it being a beautiful place, but it's the variety. You know, I'd love to go to Uluru one day because from what I hear, being there is just even more phenomenal than just looking at it. But you've got those stunning outback views, you've got the beautiful coastal views, and they're different in every state. You go along the Great Ocean Road and the views there are so different to the west coast of Tasmania or the east coast of mainland Australia up through Victoria and New South Wales. It's, so very, very different. And even in these kind of central Victoria areas that are your goldfield areas and it's away from the coast, but it's not even outback, still utterly, utterly beautiful. So, yep, I'll definitely pay that one.
Number two, the people are really friendly in Australia. So I'm from the south of England, and I don't know about you guys or where you're from, but in the south of England, like people just don't talk to each other in the streets here. Like if I go for a morning beach walk, people are like, good day, good morning, like how are you doing, like this type of thing. And people are really friendly. Like you go into a store or anywhere really, and people just want to chat to you and they're just generally really friendly, and it just makes life a little bit nicer.
You hear this from pretty much everyone who comes to Australia, and it makes me think on the flip side how much of a challenge it would be to move to a country where people don't have that freeness, that friendliness, where you can't just walk into a store and just get a really friendly greeting going in the store. I mean, I actually felt a little bit of culture shock moving to Victoria from Tasmania because, and I don't even notice it these days, but compared to Tasmania, even Victoria is slightly less friendly. And I discovered I had to tone down my friendliness when I moved to Victoria because people used to look at me like I was a little bit simple or something because of my enthusiasm with being friendly. Um, and now I wonder if that's just all in my head because I don't notice it anymore. But I'd imagine that if I were to head back down to Tassie after 7 years out of the state, that I probably would notice again how very friendly Tasmanians in particular are. So that's just my observation, but yes, Australia is definitely a very, very friendly country wherever you go.
Number three, probably my favorite thing I love about Australia, the coffee is a 10 out of 10. Now, I came to Australia in 2020 as a backpacker. I did 6 weeks on the East Coast. And honestly, that was like my first time like really trying coffee and getting into it. And I'm like, I'm freaking addicted. Like I've been like 2 coffees a day since. And I just feel that most places you go in Australia, you will get served a decent coffee. And it's not that expensive. It's like $4.50, $5, which is like £2.50 for a decent like cappuccino or latte or whatever drink you drink.
Yes, we do good coffee here in Australia, but now this video that he made is only 12 months old, but, and maybe it isn't quite so expensive up in the north. However, I do just want to acknowledge that the cost of a coffee these days at a takeaway store or a coffee shop has gone up to the point where it's become a luxury. It's become almost not affordable. When you're paying $8 or $9 for a cup of coffee, why, just why, go to the store, buy a jar of Moccona, or if you've got a pod machine, buy a packet of pods, and for the cost of two takeaway coffees, you've got weeks and weeks worth of good quality coffee. So it is disappointing that our coffee culture is going that way because I think if prices continue in that manner, we may not remain being the coffee capital of the world because you're going to see coffee shops gradually going out of business.
Number four, the blue skies in Australia just make me feel happy and calm every day. I can only compare living in Australia to living in England, but my memory of living in England, I haven't lived there in like 3 years, is like grey skies, lots of rain, and overall in Australia, living here for the past 2 years, mostly I see the blue sky every day and it just makes me feel happy and calm. And I don't really get like SAD like I used to. I used to get, it's called seasonal affective disorder. So with like bad weather and like lots of darkness, it causes your mood to like go down. So I don't really love that. But in Australia, I'm like, the sky is blue every day. Life is good, mostly.
Now, I can relate to that 100%. And it's worth knowing if you live in the UK and you do suffer from seasonal affective disorder, don't move to Tasmania. As beautiful as Tasmania is, and as friendly as Tasmania is, what he has just described is a pretty good description of Tasmania. For 9 or 10 months out of the year, it feels dark, it feels overcast, it feels cold. The first thing I noticed when I moved to Bendigo was that in the first month of living in Bendigo, I saw more blue skies, more daylight, more sunshine than what you would normally see in Tasmania in a 6 month period. Bendigo is sunny and bright pretty much all year round, and it really does have an effect on how you feel. Right now we are not even quite the middle of January, and I'm ready for autumn. I've always loved summer. It's always been my favourite season, but in Bendigo, spring and summer just blur together, and it just gets hotter through the 3 months of summer. So, spring you're still getting the temperatures up into the 20s, and you may even get temperatures up into the 30 degrees. But here you get the really long days. Even in winter, you don't get those days where you get up of a morning and get ready for work in the dark and you come home in the dark. There's a huge difference in winter in daylight hours between Bendigo and Tasmania. And for me, I know I was very much seasonally affected down in Tasmania, and I used to become so depressed getting towards early mid-February because I knew summer was all nearly over. And of course in Tassie, summer days are precious because you probably only get a handful of really good summer days during summer in Tassie, whereas here in Bendigo it happens every day. So I totally understand what he's talking about in terms of how the different weather and the sunshine and the longer days, the difference that it does make for your mental health.
This is kind of related to number 4. Number 5 is my life kind of revolves around the beach. So Australia, if you didn't know, it's nearly the same size as the US. That means there are so many places to live. Now, the reason I moved to Australia is because I wanted to live by the beach. Now my dreams come true, 10-minute walk down to the road to the beach. And yeah, I just feel like my life revolves around the beach. I wake up in the morning, get a coffee, head to the beach before work, and then I come back and work for the day. And then after work, I go to the beach again. And I love that. And especially if it's a really hot day, I'll just go swimming. Where I live, there are so many rock pools and so many options to just go swimming. So yeah, I just love that my life revolves around the beach. When living in England, I felt like my life just revolved around being inside.
Yep, the only downside of living in central Victoria is that the nearest beach is over a 2 hour drive away. And I have to say, I miss that. So, yeah, you've got to admit, having that lifestyle of just being able to go to the beach after work is pretty damn good. And it's definitely one of the really great things about living in Australia. Now, obviously, here in Bendigo, we've still got lakes, we've got rivers, but it's just not quite the same as going to the beach. And yeah, I'm yet to discover a good beach within a decent drive of Bendigo that is a dog friendly beach and where it's not severely overcrowded and where the sand feels more like boggy clay than decent sand. So if you do have a recommendation of a good dog beach, preferably not one that requires the need to drive through Melbourne and pay these insane $10 tolls, let me know.
Number 6, the travel opportunity. So I know people always say, oh yeah, but you've got Europe on your doorstep. You know, I love Europe. Europe has a special place in my heart, but I've been there so many times. But Australia has so many unique destinations. You know, we've got the desert here, we've got the rainforest, pristine beaches, and Australia is also closer to Asia, it's closer to New Zealand, and more unique destinations like New Caledonia and Fiji and the Cook Islands. So if I was in England, accessing those Australian destinations and those other ones that I spoke about would be a lot more difficult. However, living in Australia, you know, it's like a couple of hours to fly to somewhere completely different, which I know it is in the UK as well, but it's just cool to live somewhere where you have like access to a whole new field of countries and destinations.
Yes, finally, someone who doesn't spout this tired old story of the crappy thing about living in Australia is that you're so far from everything. Because you're not. Honestly, you could spend a lifetime taking holidays to different places in Australia and still not run out of unique holiday destinations. And like you said, there are so many other fantastic holiday destinations outside of Australia. The Pacific Islands, oh my gosh, you could go somewhere different there every year. And how, so many choices. New Zealand, utterly beautiful, amazing place. If you've not been there, why not? Although, not all of us can just afford to drop everything and go on holidays. But, he's so right. So right. And I'm so glad to actually hear this for once from someone rather than the tired old, it's so isolated you can't go anywhere crap that you hear from so many other YouTube channels.
Number 7, quality of life in Australia for me feels a lot higher than the UK. So firstly, like education is supposed to be better. Don't quote me on that, but that's just what Google told me. And secondly, healthcare. Now, I once needed to go to the doctor's appointment. My mental health was really shit one day, which that totally happens. And I called a doctor. I had an appointment that day, and then I saw like a therapist like a few days later. And I was like, oh my God, when I lived in England, that would be like weeks, maybe even months before you even seeing it. And you also have to like justify why you need like healthcare in England. Like I felt like anytime I would ever access health services, which was rare, but obviously you do need to at sometimes, they're like, oh, but do you really need to see someone? And I just felt like when I access health services here, it's just like no questions asked. Although yeah, you do have to pay a little bit. It's like it's you just get it straight away. This is also my experience, by the way. So if you're Australian and you have other problems, like that's nothing to do with me.
Wow, imagine ringing a clinic and trying to make a doctor's appointment and having to actually justify your need for that appointment. That to me is just deplorable. Now, I have to say, it seems like definitely in the north of Australia, there seems to be better access to medical services. For me, I can get a telehealth appointment sooner than I can get a face-to-face appointment. But even then, I can't get a telehealth appointment on the same day, and it costs more to do a telehealth appointment. You have to pay up front, and you pay more than what you would do if you go into the clinic. As for getting an appointment at the doctor's clinic, usually you can expect it to take about a week to get in. And so many of the clinics here in Bendigo don't even take on new clients anymore. So I know where I go, they don't take on new clients anymore. And, I wonder, had I moved here now, would I be driving down to Melbourne to see a doctor? So, yeah, definitely I think it's depends on where you're at, and I think there are definitely some regional areas that are struggling a bit in terms of medical services. So, yeah, definitely I think it depends on where you live in Australia.
Included in the high quality of life bracket, I will include high wages. So generally, people get paid a lot more in Australia. My personal circumstances, so I'm not working as a social worker at the moment, but when I was in the UK, I think I started on like £30,000, which is about $60,000. That's, it's an okay wage for living in the UK. It's okay for like starting wage. However, if I was to work as a social worker where I live in Australia, I would get paid like $120,000. So that's around 60 to 65,000 pounds. So in essence, my wages would just double for me doing the same work. So I think that's pretty cool. I even watched a TikTok a few weeks ago about a girl that was a nurse in England and she moved to Australia and she worked in an ice cream van and she got paid more money working at the ice cream van than as a nurse in England. Like, it's just a no-brainer.
Now, according to this guy, the getting a visa was really, really hard. And he said something about he would have had to have done or chased up paperwork to get a professional visa. I just want to point out that here in Victoria, at least, over the last couple of years, they've been offering paid placements for people to study social work. So, this guy, had he truly wanted to stay in Australia, then, there would have been work available for him, and he could have actually gotten work in a skilled position, in a position where they are screaming for more social workers. So, to me, that says that probably he wanted to live in Australia, but he didn't really want to work in Australia, perhaps. Maybe that's an unfair observation, but when your profession is one of those professions that is screaming out for more employees and you claim that you can't get a visa, I got to question that. But yes, it seems to be a common thing that you hear that in Australia wages are definitely better. And I'm glad he's acknowledged this, because I've heard from other people who claim that, well, moving from the UK to Australia, it costs so much more to buy food. And they ignore the fact that wages are higher, utilities are cheaper, fuel is half the price. So, yeah, I'm glad he has actually acknowledged this.
So number 8, winters are so much more milder here. So I've done 2 winters in Australia and they vary around like 10, 15 degrees. Like that is like the lowest, the minimum. And I still go to the beach every day. I don't necessarily go swimming, but I just find that you don't really need a jacket here. There'll be like a cooler period for like 3 or 4 weeks where I'm like, oh, put a jacket on. But then you go out and you get too hot, so you just end up taking it off anyway. There were even a few days in the winter when it was like 25 degrees, and I'm like, this is not winter. Like in English winters, I'm used to like freezing or like -5 degrees, and it's just like, for me, I just can't deal with the really cold temperatures. It's just like unbearable for me.
Yeah, I must admit, here in Bendigo, there's probably only 4 or 5 weeks in the middle of winter where you need to put on a jacket. But to say that overall it is milder, yep, I couldn't begin to tell you how many -4 degrees mornings I saw where I was living in Tasmania. And where I used to work in Tasmania in the middle of winter, it was a good day. It was a warm day if you reached double figures in the temperature in the middle of winter. You know, in Tassie, once the temperature reaches about 15 degrees, that's t-shirt weather. And you get frost, you get ice, you periodically get snow. You don't get the really, really heavy snow that some parts of England get, but it's still kind of chilly. So definitely, if you are moving to Australia and you want the milder weather, definitely you want to go north of Melbourne even. I mean, I think back to where I worked for quite some time in Tassie, and during the winter, I used to wear fleece-lined stockings. Over them, I would wear Explorer socks, and then long boots, knee-length boots, and then a skirt or a dress or something. I would have a thermal top on top with a long-sleeved, not skiffy, but long-sleeved top over the top of that. And usually there would probably be a jacket as well, or a puff vest or something. And of course, if you had to go and spend time outside, you would need gloves and a beanie. Well, I couldn't tell you the last time I wore any thermals, and I've not needed my fleece-lined stockings since I moved to Bendigo. I ended up just getting rid of them because, I was basically, I had probably close to a dozen different jumpers, and that's not counting my thermals, just jumpers and wind cheaters, hoodies, etc. And most of them weren't getting worn anymore because, like I said, only a few weeks through winter. So it's definitely relative.
Number 9 is the active lifestyle. So my daily routine, as I said, go to the beach, 6 a.m. Everyone's out at the beach. Everyone's swimming, surfing, doing yoga, doing their workout. And I'm like, yes. Doing their hot girl walks. And I'm like, yes. I really love fitness and exercise. So I think Australia just really suits that lifestyle for me.
Okay, I don't know what a hot girl walk is, but I take offence at hearing that term. Maybe it's just me. But yeah, he's so right. I mean, even places away from the beach areas here, you go to the local lake any day, and there's just so many people there. Of a weekend, it's almost impossible to find a parking spot. You have to go right round to the overflow car park just to get a spot, unless you want to park out on the street some way away. And that's just normal anywhere that you can go for walking, etc. So definitely one of the good things we have living here in Australia.
And lastly, safety. Now, obviously, there's dodgy, sketchy areas all over the world, but in general, I feel so incredibly safe in Australia. People think the UK is really safe, but I feel like there's actually lots of crime and lots of stabbings that happen. So personally, I've been out in London and someone has pulled a knife out on me. Like, that just should not happen. Like, where I used to live, there was like certain roads that I would avoid, and obviously you do that all over the world. But in general, like, I've been here 2 years and I've not really felt unsafe ever. And I think that speaks volumes about how friendly the people are in Australia. So I went back to England last year and it was a real big shock because I hadn't been in the UK in like 2 years. And I remember being on the tube in London and you had sort of people like shouting at you and like drunk chavs on the bus. And I'm just like, fuck this. One of my big things for places I want to live is safety. So for me, Australia just feels really safe. People are really friendly and I don't feel on edge when I'm walking around. Obviously, that is my perspective of being a male, being a white male in Australia. Like, I live on the East Coast. I'm sure there's areas of Australia that you'd probably want to avoid, but yeah, in general, I feel like Australia is really safe.
Well, I think that if I were to travel on a train in England and encounter that sort of confrontational behaviour, that I would have a full-blown panic attack. So I think he's right. We do have an incredibly safe country here. I do want to add though, I find it concerning that we seem to be seeing a rise of drug-fueled violence in Australia. Too often here in Victoria, we're hearing about young people who are making really poor decisions and are becoming violent, and almost every time it's got something to do with drugs. So I hope that Australia doesn't become just another country where you become reluctant to go to the bigger cities because you don't want someone to be pulling a knife on you or whatever. So, I hope that's not something that we lose. So that brings us to the end of this video. Thanks for listening. If you're new, please subscribe to my channel. Help me to try and grow this channel. Also, please hit the like button and please leave a comment below. I need you to help me get these videos seen by more people, to help me get them into the algorithm, and to do that you can help me by clicking like and leaving a comment. So thank you, and I will catch you in the next one.